We're going to begin now. Sorry for, you know what the problem with the wireless microphones is? The wires. It's supposed to be wireless, but because of the wires, I got pieces missing that I had to go hunt down, and then the connection breaks down. I mean, I wish it would come up with wireless, truly wireless microphones, right? It is? Well, wake you up. See it making the, well, it's broken too. I told you, this wireless microphone business is broken. That little piece is broken. It breaks down. Okay, everything breaks down, guys. So today, we're going to have a special Bible study. And before you say, you know what, he's having all this Bible studies, special Bible studies and presentations, so he doesn't have to prepare for it. That's not true. I know what you might be thinking. I know we've had a few special guest visitors, whatnot. Today we have special guest visitor, Darryl Mann. Did you know that you're speaking today? He's ready. So we'll have Darryl Mann and Paul Yount. You're up too? Yeah, he's up too. But it's not going to be just them speaking, so don't feel obligated to speak a long time, even though I know that some of you can speak a long time. But don't feel bad for me if you don't leave me anytime. But we do have a Bible study, so it is connected to a study, okay? But today we celebrate first responders, and I want you to think about the characteristics. What does it take, kind of connected to our sermon as well? What does it take for men and women want to give up comforts of home and regular jobs, if you will, and risk their lives to respond to people's needs, and very often unappreciated, and very often not greeted with enthusiasm, all right? But with no further ado, we're going to have Darryl, and what I want, or Paul, which one of you? So what I wanted to do, because the preacher is so long-winded with his sermon, I didn't want to go on and have them present during Sunday service, and I'm preaching, so I'm not, telling anything about Pastor Johnson. So what I wanted them to speak about the founding of St. Timothy Volunteer Fire Department, and a little bit of history, because I've read the history myself, but it's nice to hear about that history from a firsthand experience, especially as we again celebrate our 225th anniversary of St. John. So why don't you, Paul, and come up and speak to us of whatever you want to tell us about St. Timothy and the role that St. John's members played in it, because it was a pretty key role. Okay? All right. This microphone is broken a little bit. The wire part of the wireless mic is not 10-4. So you have to kind of clip it, put it, and clip it to you. Sorry about the sound. Special effect. Okay.
Okay. I don't think this will be very long, but I'd like to tell you what I remember about this organization and the start of the St. Timothy Fire Department, and some of the reasons why it started, which are a little bit touchy. But during the late 60s and up into 1970, we evidently had a rural fire district committee formed in the rural area around Conover. Conover at that time was asking for us to get donations to help pay for fire service in the rural area. Conover felt like they weren't getting any tax, and they were spending a lot of money going out into the district that was not theirs. It was a rural district, and no taxes were being collected. So this committee was formed, and for several years, the people on that committee went around to the residents in the rural area and requested donations to help pay Conover for calls outside the city limits. The amount of those charges per call kept going up every year or every 6 months. And I can remember one number was $285 per call. And I believe Dwight told me he remembers $325 at one time. So that leads into why the department was formed. Although, like I say, it's a little bit touchy because we were having to build a fire department to serve our own needs because Conover was going to quit unless we kept paying them. And it seemed like they kept wanting to get more and more and more money. So some of you live in Conover, so I'm not trying to down you for that. I think a lot of it had to do with and I'll not say his name, but his city manager at the time. But anyway, we had a Conover Rural Fire District Committee had been formed. I don't know how it was formed, but it was formed. And they met with about 58 or 60 residents at St. Timothy Lutheran Church in 1971, February 71. After discussion, it was decided that the needs of the rural area could be better met by forming our own fire department instead of paying Conover an increasing amount of money every once in a while. And the reason for that is a car could be a car wreck on Rock Barn Road, which was out of the city limits of Conover, and we would be charged that fee even though we had nothing, the rural residents of Conover had nothing to do with that car wreck and then having to go extinguish a fire or rescue people. But it just didn't seem fair that we were having to pay Conover to come out for things like that. So after discussion at that meeting in February, it was decided that we would form a rural fire department. And the following men, I've got a list of them, is Dwight Rocket, Nelson Sigmund, Dewey Hunsucker, were elected to serve on the board of directors along with the original rural committee. And that rural committee consisted of Grover Herman, some of you still remember him, Chairman Vance Holler, it was a member of our church, Claude Hefner, Michael Rao, and Paul Bolick. That was the original committee of the board of directors of the St. Timothy Fire Department. During the spring of '71, many meetings were held by this board, and they finalized a plan for the new department. David Yunt was the county fire marshal. Some of you may remember him. Captain Harry Yunt was of the Hickory Fire Department, and they helped tremendously with how to do this, how to organize a fire department. The chairman of the committee was Vance Holler, and Claude Hefner, Michael Rao, and Paul Bolick. And anyway, they had many meetings, and then the fire department was chartered as the St. Timothy Volunteer Fire Department on March 15th, 1971. There was discussion, I remember, of whether to call it St. John's Fire Department or St. Timothy Fire Department. Well, the location of, it ended up being St. Timothy because a lot of the members went to St. Timothy, a lot of the members went to St. John's. But we had to pick one of them, and we thought that the location of the station was on Old 70, and it was nearer to the St. Timothy community. So that's the name that was picked for it. So that was organized then in 1971, March 15th. And the board of directors elected Nelson Sigmund as the chief, the first chief. And then the members that wanted to join this department had a meeting at St. Stephen's because we had no building. And they elected their own captain, or assistant chief, captain, lieutenants, and so forth. And at that time, Nelson was appointed chief by the rural board, but the firemen elected George Lafon assistant chief, Charles Sigmund was the captain, and me and Dale Stewart were lieutenants. Conley Huffman was also a lieutenant. A total of 29 firemen then attended a 50-hour training course at St. Stephen's Fire Department and other places that we picked out things to do. It was taught by, I think his name is Noxie Hoover from Steel Creek out of Charlotte. He taught that 50-hour course, which included practice burns in houses and stuff like that. Anyway, the fire department building was built by Herman and Sipe on land that was Herman and Sipe's property and rented to the department. So the fire department was paying rent on the building to begin with. It was decided to buy a 1971 Ward LaFrance diesel pumper truck. It had a 1,000-gallon capacity, and that was the first diesel pumper in Catawba County. At that time, all fire trucks were gasoline engines. So that was the first diesel pumper in the county. And I remember Probst Crossroads, shortly after we formed, they were already in existence, but they bought a Ward LaFrance diesel pumper. The only difference was theirs was automatic transmission, ours was standard drive, but that's immaterial. And then along with that, we bought a tanker, international tanker, 1,200-gallon tanker, a military-type brush buggy we bought from Newland up in the mountains. I went with Dewey Hunsucker and others that were on the committee and looked at it and tried it out and bought it. It was a little military-style brush buggy, we called it. And then we, what else? We bought with the truck. With the truck, we got a couple air packs and about a dozen sets of turnout gear, and everybody didn't even have turnout gear at that time, but we had enough to get started. Anyway, the fire department has continued to grow, and for about 10, it was in existence for about 11 years. They bought additional trucks. In 1970, let's see, it's a 74 Dodge mini pumper, nice little truck, just a small truck. We called it a mini pumper. It could be used like a brush truck. And we brought a Kenworth, 76 model Kenworth, 2,000-gallon per minute pumper. And then later on a 79 Kenworth, 2,000-gallon per minute pumper tanker with a remote control Santa Rosa. That's a nozzle up on top of the truck that can be controlled remotely. And then not long before we merged with Conover, they bought a GMC 1,250-gallon truck for a tanker truck. Anyway, in around 1980, 81, is rapid growth of the industrial area on 070 west of Conover. And that was in our area that we served. But to back up just a little bit, the first 2 years we were in existence, from 71 to 73, there was no tax being collected and given to the department to help operate, no tax. The county, I believe, was giving a little money to the department to operate in the rural areas, but I can't remember how much. But anyway, we were getting a very little amount from the county. So we had to raise money in order to exist and pay our bills. I don't want to leave the ladies out. the Ladies Auxiliary was formed, and it's basically every fireman's wife or girlfriend, I guess, if it weren't married. And they helped with fundraisers. I remember doing chicken pies, and they started with live chickens. You'd kill the chickens, pluck the chickens, or skin the chickens, and I remember at our Kleins, we had chickens hanging on the clothesline. That's kind of a sight to see, but chickens, just a row of chickens that had been plucked or skinned hanging on the clothesline. And then the ladies would have to work these up and clean them, of course, and then prepare the meat and cook it and make the pies. But that was one of their fundraisers. They did many different things like that for us. They also helped when we had fire calls, they would respond. Several of the ladies would respond with snacks and drinks for the firemen. Every fire that we actually had to spend some time on, they would appear with drinks for the firemen, water and other drinks. So the Ladies Auxiliary was an important part in helping us raise money and backing up the fire department. Anyway, in 71, 72, helping to raise money for the equipment and the trucks, pay for the trucks and the rent on the building. In 73, I think the rural Conover area appealed to the county commissioners to levy a fire tax in our district so we could get some fire tax money from these industries and the public. So the fire tax, I think, was enacted in 1973. And from 73 on to about 81, we were receiving a fire tax each year from the county. And that helped us pay our bills. Didn't have to do all those fundraisers anymore. And everything was going along pretty smoothly. In 1981, Conover decided to annex everything west of the city up to Fairgrove Church Road. And that took about 90% of our tax money Conover then got instead of us. So our board of directors met and decided we can't pay off our debts, we can't keep going like we should. So they met with Conover City Council, and they decided to merge the two departments, merge St. Timothy with Conover. And the board gave Conover our assets and our liabilities at that time. And I think our liabilities was about $30,000 to pay off a tanker that we had purchased not long before that happened. But they got the station, the land, the station, all the equipment, and the firemen for that, to pay off that debt. They basically got it for nothing. And they didn't pay anything, but they got the debt. They had to pay off the debt. So at that point, it kind of leaves St. Timothy in the background, and about 20 of us, I guess, ended up as Conover firefighters at that time. That is kind of a hard thing to do because at one point you're kind of enemies, and then you got to merge with them and work with them and be brothers to them. But it worked. And I know Dwight and I stayed until 2021, I think. So we stayed 50 years. We were in Conover's fire department for about 30, almost 40 years. So it worked out, but it was kind of hard to deal with in the beginning when some members of Conover had made some remarks that were kind of degradatory towards St. Timothy, trying to organize a little embryo fire station, and they couldn't put out fires. I'll not name his name, but I had to work with him for years. But anyway, that's kind of the story. It was a fire department out of necessity started, and if it hadn't have been for Conover's need for us to pay them for calls outside the city limits, I don't think it would ever have been started. I don't know, Darry, you got anything to add to that? Come on up. Maybe this will pick up, or I'll let you. You want this mic, or you want?
I don't know. I'll
Maybe
talk
stand
loud.
close,
You
yeah.
you can hear everybody here all right, I think. I believe I was the first or second fireman that joined the department after the original fireman. Tricia and myself got married in 1970. I had just gotten out of the Navy, and I had some pretty good fire training in the Navy because on a ship, outside of being in war, the most dangerous thing you can have is a fire. So we did extensive training and everything, which helped me somewhat. But here I am, a young 23, 4-year-old guy, and we got married, but we lived in Conover, and about the time they was forming the department, I wasn't in the district, so, you know, you couldn't be a fireman with St. Timothy. Well, in April of 72, we moved into our house right down here. And right shortly after that, Harold Baker, who was the neighbor, he kept telling me, you know, you need to go to the fire department. You need to join there. I said, yeah. Well, along about June, Harold said, yes, sir, you're going to go with me tonight. And I did. And from then on, I became a member of St. Timothy Fire Department. One thing I wanted to say, too, that back in the early 70s, when things were getting started and everything, when we have a fire call, you know, everybody didn't have a monitor or anything, so the ladies would have to get up out of bed also. We had about 4 or 5 different...
At least 5 monitors.
And they all had a call list that they had to call. And all they did, they'd call you and give you location, hang up, and call the next one. So the ladies played a big part in St. Timothy in the early years, too. And we thank them a lot for that.
Yeah.
But then as time went on, things got smoother, and, you know, you take baby steps to start with, and then, you know, we got formed pretty good. And so I stayed 22 years with the department, and I didn't have the longevity or the gumption to stay 50. So, but, yeah,
Okay.
but Paul and Dwight, they did a fantastic job of staying with the department, and that's about all I can say other than...
Yeah, those ladies, I know some of them. I don't know if I can name them all, but my wife was one of them. Dwight's wife, Ruth Rocket.
Nelson,
I'm not sure about Nelson's wife, maybe. Wayne Thornburg's wife was one of the ladies that had a monitor. These are monitors that receive the fire call, and a statement from Communication Center tells you the location of the fire, maybe what type of fire it is, and that's it. And so the ladies had to remember that, dial certain numbers on the phone on a list she had to call firemen or firemen's wives and tell them. Well, some of them wanted to talk and ask questions. She couldn't do that. You have to tell 5 or 6 other people where the fire is because everybody did not have a pager like they do today. And so that they were a special force in getting the fires dispatched. They had to act like dispatchers to relay that dispatch to other firemen because everybody didn't have communications at that time. So that was a lot of help.
One thing I just remember too, you know, the ladies' aid, like you said, would always supply refreshments and stuff because, you know, that very thankful that they would come out in the middle of the night even and they'd bring stuff and everything. But I know one night we had a bad fire up at the old Blue Moon, and it was pretty sick.
Blue Mirror?
Blue Mirror, yeah. And we was there fighting the fire and everything, and we got it out, but it was the arson type deal and everything. But our great Pastor Reidenbach, bless his heart, you know, he is always good, and he'd come to everything too. And we're sitting there getting refreshments from the ladies' aid, and he comes around, walks, and he finally said, you know, this is something else. Here you are, a bunch of guys, get up in the middle of the night, go to a fire at a bar, and then drink soda pop and eat candies. But that was Pastor Reidenbach.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
And he was one of the glue forces that kept that department together, I believe.
Yeah, he did. And back in his younger days, he lived in Conover, and he would get out and run up the side of I-40 from Conover up to Fairgrove Church Road, cross the bridge, and come back to Conover. He ran that every morning. And a lot of times he had a T-shirt that said St. Timothy Fire Department on it, or a sweatshirt. And the truckers would say, where's his truck? That fireman's running to the call. Truckers on I-40 would see his shirt. Where's his fire truck? He's having to run to the call. But he ran every morning up to Fairgrove Church Road and back, and for his exercise. But
One other thing we mentioned about our work groups on Sundays.
yeah, I have a list of those. Yeah, Dara just mentioned to me about our work groups on Sunday. Since most of the members were either from St. John's or St. Timothy, we organized 6 work groups on Sunday morning. So that meant every 6 weeks you'd have to miss church and go to the fire station and do maintenance on the trucks and stand by for fire calls on Sunday morning. We were actually better prepared to respond to fires on Sunday morning than any other time. But I got a list of them, but I didn't no need to read them off. But the officers were generally in charge of the work groups, and about 4 or 5 of the firemen would be in that work group. And some of them had different skills and would do different things, like housekeeping, changing oil in the trucks, lubricating the trucks, and checking the batteries in the trucks and things like that every week. And that was a necessity, because probably 90% or more of the firemen went to either St. John's or St. Timothy.
Yeah, we were a good church-going bunch of people.
Yeah,
We were.
it was basically organized by those 2 churches in the community.
Yeah, I know we always drove the trucks on Sunday mornings too, because a lot of times they weren't drove during the week. And, you need to drive your vehicles, so you're sitting around. And so we'd always, take 1 or 2 out at a time and drive them and everything. And I'll never forget, we had a young fireman that just joined it, and I was driving to Ward to France one Sunday morning, and he rode with me. Well, we had a foot button on the passenger side that would operate the siren, and he didn't realize that was there. And we're going, and I'm right there in downtown Conover, right there at the 5 Points, and there's a little lady in front of us in a car, and he accidentally hits that switch. And that poor lady, she just went all to pieces, didn't know what to do. So I got out of the truck and walked up to her. I said, ma'am, don't worry, that's our fault, and we're very sorry it happened. And she said, well, that scared me to death. but those accidents would happen, but, she was all right after that and everything. So, but, we can have some good stories we could tell.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if
Yeah, that's not enough time to do it.
Yeah.
But there was, at that time, the fire department was not dispatched on every medical call in the area. I wanted to bring that up. Today, they may be dispatched to a heart attack, breathing problems, a fall. Most of the time, the ambulances were dispatched only to that. Today, fire departments are dispatched along with the ambulances to every one of those kind of calls. So if you make a 911 call for a health problem, you're going to get fire trucks too. But that was not the case back in the 70s. Anyway, it's been a good trip. And like I say, Dwight and I stayed in for 50 years, got out in 21, and we're proud of what we were able to do. I just basically wore out. I just got to where I could not stand and walk and work like I used to. But I'm getting a little bit older, so. Anything else there? Any questions that any of you want to try to ask us? I don't.
And if you have any questions that we don't know the answer, you can always ask Dwight.
Yeah.
Dwight's very knowledgeable.
He just don't want to talk in
He
front
don't
of a
wanna
group.
talk, that's right, but he's very
All right.
knowledgeable.
The ones at the church? I'm not sure.
I think there was a few monitors, some of us had monitors, but the little hand monitors back then, after that, and so, you know, they'd go off, and if that person stood up, and when everybody else stood up.
Everybody
and
else is
too.
standing.
I remember that happening. I remember that happening in church.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a couple of times we had fire called in church, yeah.
Yeah, we had some way of notifying them in church, and I guess it was by that time. I think we had bought some of our own little pagers.
Yeah, so many people had those
The
too.
department had bought some of those, and some of the people in the church would have those, but they weren't the type that they could quieten down, they'd go off, yeah.
I guess you had volunteer fire departments before that? Before you organized the,
It was Conover that was supplying the fire protection for the area, the city of Conover.
even if it was out the area?
Yeah, they would come,
It was called the Conover Rural Area at that time.
yeah. When this church burned in 1950, Conover Fire Department responded to this church in 1950. When it burned in 21, no, 01, when it burned in 01, St. Timothy, no, Conover responded again because we had merged with Conover. Anyway, some of the St. Timothy firemen were fighting fire at this church in 01. Myself and Dwight included, and Dara. So, what did you? How many? I counted on the list out there, and I wanted to mention that too. In the parish hall is a list of the Conover firemen. I mean, the St. Timothy firemen that were from this church. And I think I counted 17. Now, all of them were not there at one time. Some of them came, stayed a few years and left. But a total of 17 from this church have served in the St. Timothy Fire Department. Out of about 29 to start with, we probably had 12 or 15 from St. John's. And
I believe if you look at that list out there, the ones that were charter members of the department will have 20-plus years beside their name, most of them, you
I
know.
think so.
So,
I have the list.
yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to read it, or do you want me to do it?
I didn't bring it in here, I don't think.
Yeah, Dana did this.
Well, I can read it if they're interested, if they've got time. The chief was Nelson Sigmund. Bob Rocket, Dwight's brother, was assistant chief. I was elected captain to begin with. Dale Stewart and Wade Flowers were lieutenants. Conley Huffman and Wayne Thornburg, Conley was secretary and Wayne was treasurer. Charles Sigmund was training officer. Ray Hildebrand, equipment engineer. Charles Ray Bolick was traffic officer, and Ken Reidenbach, Reverend Ken Reidenbach, was chaplain. Truck maintenance and repair was listed. Myself and Ray Hildebrand were listed as truck maintenance and repair. And then in the work groups, I've got myself, Charles Bolick, Ira Klein, Ryan Rocket. Now, all these aren't St. John's members. Dale Stewart, Dara Mann, Johnny Punch Sr., Thomas Klein, Corky Miller, Marty Huffman, and third group was Bob Rocket, John Black, George Hefner, Robbie Helton. Fourth work group was Conley Huffman, Wayne Thornburg, Joel Flowers, and Fred Starnes. Work group 5 was Ray Hildebrand, Johnny Spencer, Dwight Rocket, Johnny Punch Jr., Dean Wright, and then the last work group 6 was Wade Flowers, Charles Sigmund, Harold Baker, and Randy Loop. And again, that's not all St. John's members. That's a lot of them were St. Timothy, and not too many were not from St. John's or St. Timothy. There is a display of helmets on a table out in the parish hall, and Dwight has got those organized and got names in front of them of who wore them. I think it'd be interesting for you to walk by those when you can. And Dwight went to a lot of trouble having to clean up some of them, and because it looked like it had been hanging in a barn for 30 years. But anyway, the helmets are out there, and that's just the ones that were from St. Timothy. I have a couple other helmets that I got when I was at Conover, merged with Conover. I could say one more thing about the merger. Reed Poovey was chief at that time of Conover. Good guy to work with. He and I were good friends. He had picked me and Ronald Kaler for what we called then district chiefs. Ronald was kind of like an assistant chief in Conover district, and I was the district chief in the old St. Timothy district. So we kind of kept us separated for a while. I mean, as far as, I think Reed was trying to make it merge better, by including the St. Timothy guys in the leadership and Conover in the leadership. So he actually split it into 2 districts. District 1 was in Conover, District 2 was the St. Timothy rural area. And it maintained that for a good many years, but I think as the volunteers started dropping off, and I think today you probably won't find 1 or 2 volunteers in Conover. They're all on the paid staff. You can't get volunteers anymore. I don't know. There are many reasons, I guess, but people just don't want to do it anymore. I remember getting up in the middle of Conover's meeting one night, and I said, "You guys just are not dedicated." I said, when I joined St. Timothy and we organized, it was not unusual at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning for every fireman to show up at the call and back here at the station to clean up stuff. And now we're lucky to get 2 or 3 of you. And I guess I made enemies, but I was kind of aggravated because at St. Timothy, every fireman on the list showed up, it seemed like. And at Conover, that didn't happen after we merged, and it got worse and worse till you just don't get volunteers anymore. Most of the departments in the county don't have any volunteers anymore. Well, some of them do. They have to. I know Bandy's is about has to have a lot of volunteers. St. Stephen's, they have some full-time because they got county tax money coming in, and they can afford some full-time people. It takes a lot of money to run a fire department. We got 3 stations now in Conover. To do it perfectly, you'd have to have 4 firemen at each station, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's a lot of people to pay. So Conover right now has, I think, 1 person at Station 3. It's out here at C&V Farm Road and Lyle Creek School. I think it's 1 person stationed there. There's 2 up at the Station 2, which is the old St. Timothy station, and there's maybe 3 at downtown Conover station, which is down on Thornburg Drive. So basically got 3, 4, 5, 6 at 3 stations all the time. And that's why when they have anything to amount to anything, a call, they have to dispatch all of them because they drive their truck and then they get out of the truck and go help fight fire. They don't get many volunteers coming in anymore to help. They had a fire last night. And I understand it was one of Todd Yunt's apartments on Rifle Range Road. And Conover and St. Timothy go up to the bridge on Rifle Range Road from Lee Klein Road. So those apartments are in the district. And I feel sorry for the family. Todd and his family have lost their mother, and funeral's tomorrow. But now Todd's got an apartment fire he's got to deal with along with his mother's funeral. But they went last night, and I know all the trucks went. And everybody says, well, you don't need all those trucks. Well, they have to get to the fire, and they're at the fire station, so they drive the truck. And sometimes they use equipment out of all the trucks. So that's why you see a lot of fire trucks at the scene of a fire. It's because of necessity to get the people there to help them. Anyway, I thought that was a little bit of information you probably didn't know. And if Conover would increase their budget for the fire department, maybe they could have a little better numbers responding. Anyway.
I'll say something. When the Ward of France was purchased, like he said, it was the first diesel fire apparatus in the county. And most all the apartments kind of laughed and said, you can't rely on a diesel because it's hard to start when it's cold and stuff like that. But shortly after we did some mutual aid with some people, they found out how good that truck was, and they started purchasing diesel trucks
Right.
after that in Tisa.
Right. Even Hickory did not have a diesel
Right.
truck
Everything
at that
does.
time. St. Timothy had the first diesel truck in the county. And like I told earlier, Probst was second.
Yeah, I think Denise
Yeah.
had a question.
So I know you have there's a fireman's museum in the area, it's like there's information and different stuff.
Do you hear?
In that museum.
I didn't understand your question.
That museum, the firefighters museum, she's asking.
Oh. The firefighters museum, I think, the only thing Dwight could tell you more about it if he'd talked, but the museum land was purchased about the time we merged with Conover. And Dwight's thought, talking to me, was they thought if this merger didn't work out with Conover, they would build another station right there and reorganize St. Timothy. So it's kind of a trial deal when they gave Conover all the assets. And if it didn't work out, they'd have property they could use to build another station. But they decided to build the museum and got some county money to help build the museum. It's not staffed too much. I think on Sundays. Again, if Dwight would talk, he could tell us. He's not even up there. Dwight is one of them that goes to the museum once in a while.
Yeah, he does that quite a bit.
And yeah, he's up there. I think on some Sundays, Sunday afternoons.
Yeah, when they built that museum, there was a lot of volunteer labor on it, and I guess we could say a little slave labor too, because my electricity classes wired that building when it was built.
Oh, okay.
So, the county, I think, did make a donation to our
We talked to
class after that. So.
We talked to.
Well, and again, I want you to, as we close up, I think the bell already rang, didn't it? Yeah, okay, we don't have to fire. So I want you to reflect, and it is, I want you to think about the characteristics of, or what calls men and women into this line of work. And I think what we can reflect on is that they all have compassion, right? And what is compassion? It's the ability to empathize and often to sympathize with the plight of people who are struggling, and the desire to respond to that need out of selfless love and dedication. And Paul talked about that the idea that, you know, in the middle of the night when your pager goes off, right? You know, what the easiest thing to do is to reach out and turn it off, and to think that somebody else can respond, that these men and women, they answer that call, and as we celebrate firefighters and EMTs and law enforcement officers, that they very often they do so in a place and culture that doesn't appreciate what they do. And you see, and it is to a certain degree a lost art or ability to especially volunteer, that most of the departments, as Paul reflected, they don't have volunteers anymore. And even the volunteers that they have, they get paid. These guys didn't get paid to get up and sacrifice their time with their families and their children. And it's not just calls, right? It's a lot of hours of training that you have to be certified. So it's not like, So we acknowledge and we celebrate the compassion that they have, because this is what God gave us, right? Is the ability to empathize, because he had compassion on us. He is the ultimate first responder who came and to help us and to rescue us. Why? Not because he would benefit from it, right? He didn't need to get up and leave heaven, but he put on the uniform and he came to save us. So thank you again for your presentation and for the, that's what I was talking about, yeah. Anyway, thank you for coming. All right, let's give a round of